Jen walked up here and moved the microphone down. I was like, sweet, I don't have to move the microphone down. Sorry, I'm a little bit of a wreck here. I'm chewing gum. I got snot bubbles. My tie's tied too long. But I'm going to get through this. Thank you all for coming. I felt like I was doing pretty good this morning, and then I walked in that back door, and I saw a gym full, bleachers to bleachers, every seat full. It's amazing. I didn't know what I was in for. Thank you all for coming. I'm truly humbled to speak about my friend Greg Moore, or whatever you called him, Greg, Sergeant Moore, G-Money, K-27. My 10-year-old son calls him Mr. Worldwide, like the music star Pitbull, because after lip-syncing to a few jams at our house a couple years ago, Greg said, "You can just call me Mr. Worldwide." That might be the toughest time I've had all week, is when my son asked me, "How's Mr. Worldwide doing?" On Tuesday night, a candlelight vigil was held shortly after Greg had passed away earlier in the evening. After I reiterated a few words at the ceremony of thanks to the community, a couple of local TV stations and a newspaper reporter asked to speak with me about my memories of Greg. The next morning, I ran a Google search and found that the Associated Press News Syndicate had distributed a story that had been picked up by newspapers from Florida and New York to Southern California and Seattle. On a side note, I was identified in that story that was picked up across the country as Don Eccles instead of Dan. Now, you know who would have laughed more about that than anyone else? This guy. He would have started calling me Don every time he thought it would get a good giggle. So I've been a newspaper editor for about 20 years. I filled those inside pages of a newspaper with regional and national news, and I was admittedly a little surprised that newspapers nationwide were picking up the story. But I was impressed, and that's because it seemed to me that the story struck a chord with editors nationwide. It seemed special. Like our friend Greg. He was special. He didn't have a big personality. He had a freaking huge personality. I look at this turnout today, and it's evidence of that. Sometimes we'd see somebody with a goofy skill or a seemingly mundane little singular talent, and we'd joke, that guy had one talent, he just wasted his. But Greg had many talents, and in talking with his family and friends in recent days, it became glowingly evident to me and to us his biggest talent or gift was his ability to be likable and cultivate friendships. I've been blessed to have three guys I can all call my best friend. Greg was one of those. I'm sure there are a handful at least of guys out there who would call Greg their best friend. But who was his? I'm not sure he could tell you, and ultimately it doesn't matter. When he was with you, he made you feel like his best friend. As I spoke to him Tuesday evening at his hospital bedside, I told him he was the first person outside of my family that I knew really cared about me as a person and a friend. My wife told me to make sure I printed out my notes in big font so I could read them through the tears. Good tip, honey. And I knew that feeling shortly after I met him. It didn't take me long. I knew that. Shortly after I met him, I knew he cared about me. His actions and his words told me so. Greg was never afraid to share his feelings and have a deep talk. He was confident, not cocky, confident enough to be vulnerable. That helped me, and I'm sure it helped many others be vulnerable too. Like Pastor Rodney, he helped me become a better friend. Greg had his Walla Walla friends. He had his law enforcement friends, his Coeur d'Alene friends, his college friends. Everywhere he looked, that man had friends. And he had an amazing sense of humor. He loved to tease. I've been teased about being short so many times for 21 years. I've stuck my foot in my mouth plenty of times, and certainly he teased me about those on every occasion he could. But nothing topped jumping my case for being vertically challenged. The saying, "we kid because we care," that was genuinely embraced by Greg Moore. If he didn't care about you, he'd just move on. But if he teased you, you knew he cared about you. And he didn't just like to tease you, he liked to test you. Greg and I and Bob Dye and another friend of ours, Mike, were at a Mariners game in the old Kingdome in August 1995. Bob and Greg were working at Sherwin-Williams in Walla Walla that summer. Sherwin-Williams corporate had box seats to Mariners games. And somehow those guys corralled us a few seats for a weekend series. But when we went to Seattle, I got specific instructions that if anybody asked, I was Dan Eccles, a big Sherwin-Williams client that only paid cash. So we're watching the Mariners and Red Sox on a Sunday afternoon. There's 4 of us. I'm in the end seat of our group. There's an empty seat, and then there's another group of people. And in that empty seat was a bag of peanuts from the other group. Remember, Greg liked to test you. Greg bumps me on the shoulder, and he says, "Hey, grab us a few peanuts." I did, without getting caught, the first time. But then when he asked me to try a second time, I got caught red-handed with my hand in the peanut bag. I don't even like peanuts. I don't know if I've ever heard Greg laugh so hard. It wasn't loud, but it was that hard, quiet giggle because he was trying not to embarrass all 40,000 people there. But that was Greg, always trying to get you. It seemed like the instances where one of us got one on him were few and far between. He was always getting us, but there were a few. And they sure were entertaining when we got them. I talked to Bob. Bob shared the best story that we could kind of come up with of Greg kind of getting one on his end. So there was a day at the Sherwin-Williams store in Walla Walla in the summer of 1994. So busy that it was going to be tough for the guys to get away for lunch. The manager told Bob, "Hey, use some store money, go buy lunch and bring it back." And that's apparently when a big, huge, flashing light bulb went off in Bob's head. He told Greg, "This is messed up. We're not going to get lunch. I'm going to run and grab something. The store's paying for it." Greg's like, "Okay, are you sure?" So Bob runs, gets lunch, and lets the manager know he's got Greg on the line, and they just got to reel him in. So the manager that afternoon goes up to Greg, shows him a little receipt, and says, "Hey, what's this?" And, of course, there's Greg's employee number on this little receipt for taking out the funds, not Bob's. So naturally, Greg proceeds to throw Bob under the bus as fast as he can. "He did it, not me!" But the story doesn't end there. Bob and the manager hatch a scheme and tell Greg that the district manager is coming to town and checking over all the financial anomalies. Now, this is a time where Greg was set to leave Sherwin-Williams in about a month and go to school at UI. So Bob pleads with Greg, please take the fall for me. I need this job. You're leaving." And Greg responds with an expletive and then says, "If I'm going down, you're going down with me." So finally, after a day or two of stewing, Bob lets Greg in on the scam, and it's one of those rare occasions where Greg got to feel the other end of the joke that we always got to feel. One thing I can assure you is no joke is my love for Greg Moore. And I know I'm not alone when I say this. He may not have been blood, but he was my family, my brother. I know he loved me and you as much as we all loved him. I'm sad there will be no more memories to make with my brother, but the ones I have, I'm forever grateful for. It will be hard, but I'm going to force myself to choose to not focus on this great loss, but instead celebrate the 21 years of priceless friendship that I was lucky enough to have. Greg Moore, we love you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Dan. Another longtime friend from Walla Walla is going to come at this time, Sean Sugars. So, Sean, would you come and share your thoughts with us today? Thank you.
G-Money. G-Money. To most, there is no meaning, but to a few of his closest friends, this was our term of endearment. For those who didn't know, Greg loved to play video games with his friends. G-Money was also Greg's gamer tag on Xbox. The name G-Money transitioned from the gamer world to everyday life with his friends. That's what we called him. I first met Greg back in 2001. There was a tradition started which was coined Mancation. This group included Greg, G-Money, Mike, the Bat, Jerry, Snatch Rider, and myself, Shug Jammer. Mancation was a biannual gathering focused on spending time with our friends involved in antics normally reserved for those much younger. What antics, you may ask? We would argue every year about who would have the right to have Mancation named after them. Normally, we would all just give in and would end up being Jercation for Jerry. Very few times it was Mike-cation, Sean-cation, or Greg-cation. The individual it was named after would then choose the activities and eating locations for that trip. They also would get the only available bed in the house. Greg had many characteristics. He was an encourager, a supporter. One weekend we were all at Hayden Lake. I needed emotional support for a very difficult event. Greg was the one willing to stand beside me and help me through the experience. He was selfless. He actually reached out his hand up in support. Then on the count of 3, we both took that leap of faith, side by side, hand in hand, plummeting off the 8-foot platform, his was actually 5 foot, into Hayden Lake. That was the kind of friend Greg was. He was just downright fun. What other characteristics? Safety first. Mancation 2010. The boys brought with them in a bright yellow Tonka truck and a big wheel. G-Money and the other boys all decided that a race was mandatory. Tonka truck versus big wheel. Since I was the largest, I was 80 pounds heavier then, everyone felt I would fit in the Tonka truck the best. Jerry rode the big wheel, and they chose the perfect location, a steep hill located right beside one of the busiest city streets. G-Money ensured that safety first was implemented, and they allowed me to wear a bicycle helmet and a reflective belt. The race was successful, no injuries, and no police citations were issued. One final characteristic, competitive. Mancation, 2011. During one of the late night shenanigans, the boys, excluding me, were all concentrating on a video game session. I snuck in and at the top of my lungs yelled, "Woo!" resulting in the startling reflex. Big eyes, uncontrolled arm and leg movements. This was the start of our woo tradition. The next morning, we decided to have a woo competition. We broke out the decibel meter reader, which, yes, I had in my house, and we all took turns wooing at the top of our lungs, trying to achieve the highest reading. The winner reached 126 decibels. This wooing did not stop there. And throughout that weekend, at random times and places, someone would just yell out at the top of their lungs, followed by additional yells of all the additional Mancation members. This was the official start of the wooing Mancation tradition. Mancation was not always just laughter and fun. We also had serious moments. Most Mancations, we would wake up in the morning and head out into the mountains for dirt bike riding or to take a long hike. During these times, we would have time to talk to each other about life, family, kids, work, and our futures. I will, however, cherish Mancation 2015 the most, which we had 3 weeks ago. All the same antics, just a new year. Who would have thought that this would be our last time together? This was the last time I saw Greg. It was about 11 o'clock in the morning. I can still see it like it was yesterday. The sun was shining. It was a gorgeous morning, and I hugged each one of my friends, all 3 grown men, and then I watched them load up into a 2011 Toyota Prius. Driving back to Coeur d'Alene from College Place, Washington. They got in the car and left. I will never forget that last moment. We hugged, and what he always said when we said goodbye was, "Take care, buddy. Take care, buddy." Greg was not just a friend. He was family. He was our brother. Dan, he was our brother. Jerry, Mike, if it's okay with you guys, I would like to officially make all future Mancations Gregcation. I'd encourage everyone to start new traditions with your closest friends. Do not let an opportunity pass by where you can spend quality time together. Make that time. In celebration of his life, I'm going to give one final woo for my friend. And since it was a requirement of Mancation, I'm going to need some audience participation. When I woo, everyone here and wherever you're watching are going to woo back. And we're going to do it until it's done right. And I want Post Falls, Spokane, I want the whole United States to hear this. Is everyone ready? All right. I got to step back. Woo! One more. Woo! Play on, G-Money. Play on.
Thank you, Sean. At this time, Johann Schmitz, a fellow officer, and we know Greg had a lot of best friends, but to my information, this was Greg's current best friend. This was the current best friend. And a fellow officer is going to come at this time. So thank you, Johann.
Maybe Greg just liked to befriend vertically challenged people. Made him feel better. Service, excellence, pride, and dedication. These words are embroidered upon the patch donning the shoulder of every member of the Coeur d'Alene Police Department. They serve to remind us of what we stand for, and they're intended to define the character of the men and women who wear the uniform. Words alone can never truly define our character. Instead, it's the manner in which we choose to live our lives that defines the person we are. Our actions will establish how we'll be remembered. And I know Greg will be remembered well. You know, I don't share the long history that many here have with Greg. I came to this department late in life, and my time with Greg was too brief. But in our short time together, I came to know Greg as a tremendous police officer, an outstanding supervisor, a leader of men, a common sense thinker, and a problem solver. And most importantly, I came to know him as my dear, dear friend, and I loved him. Greg and I took to another right away, and it's not because of his charm or his brutal honesty or his quick wit, which I did appreciate, and it's not because he constantly reminded me that those were his particular strengths. I liked Greg because of the manner in which he treated others, the way he treated his co-workers, the way he treated this community, the way he treated Lindy, and the way he treated Dylan and Gemma. And I noticed these things, and frankly, so did everyone else. Greg's actions did so much more to define his character and cement his legacy than any words that can ever be embroidered on a patch. Greg viewed the people we encountered on the street not as enemies to be vanquished, but as fellow citizens who, through fate or circumstance, found themselves adverse to the law. He believed strongly in accountability, but he was always fair. And he was never one to hold a grudge. And more importantly, Greg never gave up on the people he served. Even after 16 years, Greg resisted the all-too-common theme of becoming jaded. He never allowed himself to think that anyone was beyond saving. And I recall countless occasions when Greg chose to follow up with people who found themselves on the wrong side of the law. He'd repeatedly check on them, provide advice, resources, and encouragement so they could improve their situation. And this wasn't the exception with Greg. It was the norm. He believed if he could change just one life, make one person's situation better, his career would have been worthwhile. And this dedication to helping others truly defines the kind of man Greg was. He was ever mindful of our relationship with the community, and he worked tirelessly to maintain and strengthen it. And looking around, I know Greg would be proud to say the way this community has come together. And I know he's pleased to see his efforts were not in vain. But it's up to all of us to continue his work. I opened my remarks by speaking about the words inscribed upon our patch. And Greg took the word service seriously, and he never took his oath to this community lightly. What did service mean to Greg? It meant making the hard choices. Greg embraced the hard part of service. That meant doing things that were hard and often frightening, so our community was better served and protected. And in his last example of this, it meant stopping when something didn't look right. It would have been easy to drive past, there was no one else around, and no one would have known. Except that serving and protecting our community demanded that Greg stop, and he did, without hesitation. The decision to do what was hard cost Greg his life. But if Greg had 1,000 chances to make the same decision again, he would have done the exact same thing every time. Greg's example in this regard is why this building's filled with men and women who make those same hard decisions on a daily basis. It's why I'm standing here, and it's why I'm proud to call Greg my friend. I know one of Lindy's greatest pains will be coming to grips with the fact that Gemma will grow up without her father, without the opportunity to see the type of man that Greg was. I'll say this, I know the type of man he was. All of us in this department know the type of man Greg was, and this community knows the type of man Greg was. And together, we'll never let Gemma or Dylan forget who Greg was. We'll ensure the values Greg stood for will be passed on, and we'll never fail to be there in any hour of need. Greg and I spent many nights stored up discussing topics that ranged from silly to serious, but he always made it a point to lecture me about perspective when I complained about life or circumstances. He encouraged me to enjoy what I had, and he wanted to make sure I had perspective. That gift of perspective is now one we can all share. Greg knew a career in law enforcement meant that the things we cherish most can be lost in an instant. It did not stop him from coming to work every day, and it will not stop any of us who do this job. We will all keep coming to work with the support of our spouses and our children, and we will all continue to make the hard choices. Because of Greg, now more than ever, we'll cherish what we have. We'll cherish our friends. We'll cherish each other. And most importantly, we'll cherish the short amount of time we have on this earth and make the most of it. I know Greg made the most of his time, and I hope you'll all join me in honoring him by doing the same. Thank you.
Leadership is such a gift at a time like this. It really is in the difficult times that leadership rises to the top, and I have been able to witness good leadership. In fact, let me say that again, great leadership in this difficult week, and that is in our chief of police that was sent to us from the good people of the state of Arizona, which we thank. And Lee White is coming at this time to share.